Have you ever paused to truly wonder who shapes the news stories, the shows you stream, or even like the TikToks that pop up on your feed every single day? It's a deeper question than just who's posting it, right?
Absolutely.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to explore the fascinating and, let's be honest, often surprising world of media ownership and control.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
It really is. We've got a fantastic set of articles, research, and insights right here, diving deep into the sociological perspectives on this.
A really rich stack of sources to work with.
Exactly. And our mission, well, it's to strip away the jargon, give you the essential understanding.
Kind of cut through the complexity.
Yeah, helping you grasp not just who owns the media, but the profound impact that ownership has on what you consume and, well, on society itself.
We'll look at different viewpoints, key concepts.
And give you a shortcut, hopefully, to being genuinely well-informed.
Sounds good.
So let's jump straight into it. We can start by looking at two major ways of thinking about who holds the power in media. First up, there is a perspective often called pluralism.
Right, pluralism. Pluralists tend to paint a pretty optimistic picture, actually.
Okay.
Their core idea is that the media, well, by its very nature, it's incredibly diverse. It represents a wide range of views, meaning no single group or individual really dominates the narrative.
So they're saying ownership itself is spread out across lots of different companies.
That's a key part of it, yeah. The idea is that because ownership is dispersed, no one owner can have absolute control.
And from this viewpoint, the real power lies with us, with the audience.
Exactly. If a media outlet doesn't reflect your views or give you the content you want, you just choose another one.
As simple as that.
Well, that's the theory. Consumer demand, they argue, is what really drives media content. And what's truly insightful, I think, about the pluralist perspective is how it positions the media as this vital fourth estate.
Ah, the watchdog idea.
Precisely. A crucial check on power in a democracy, holding governments, corporations, everyone accountable. The underlying assumption there is that journalists are objective, impartial gatekeepers.
Delivering news fairly, free from owner interference.
That's the ideal they paint.
Yeah.
The core insight is that, a free market of ideas driven by your choices should guarantee a balanced and truthful media landscape.
That paints a very optimistic picture, doesn't it? Almost. Ideal.
It does.
But here's where our sources introduce a really sharp contrast. They invite us to look at things through a more critical lens, particularly from Marxist and Neo-Marxist viewpoints. How do these perspectives kind of flip the script?
They absolutely flip it. The core idea from these critical perspectives is that the media primarily serves the interests of the ruling class.
Okay, the powerful.
Right, helping to maintain and reinforce capitalist ideology. They argue that media ownership is far from spread out. It's actually highly concentrated.
Concentrated in the hands of
A few incredibly wealthy individuals or massive corporations. And these owners, the argument goes, directly influence or even control content to protect their own economic and political interests.
So it's not just about direct orders, is it? I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture, thinkers like Louis Althusser, he described the media as an ideological state apparatuses.
Exactly, an ISA.
Yeah.
Essentially a subtle, almost invisible tool that spreads the dominant ideology. It socializes people, basically, into accepting capitalism as the natural, unquestioned way things are.
Wow. And Antonio Gramsci took that even further, didn't he, with cultural hegemony?
He did. Gramsci's idea is fascinating. He suggests the ruling class maintains power not just by force, but by winning the consent of the masses.
Consent. How does media fit in?
The media plays a key role by presenting capitalist ideas, things like consumerism, individualism, as just common sense.
Making them seem natural, universal.
Even if they primarily benefit the powerful, it's about making the dominant ideology feel like everyone's ideology.
And to really drive this home, our sources highlight some, well, pretty compelling evidence from a neo-Marxist research group back in the 70s, the Glasgow Media Group, the GMG.
Ah, yes, the GMG. Their work was quite groundbreaking. They found some powerful examples of this kind of subtle systemic bias.
Like what?
Well, they showed how media content almost automatically favors the powerful. For instance, their research on industrial strikes showed coverage frequently blamed the workers, framing them as disruptive, rather than exploring the employer's role or the broader context.
So the framing itself carries the bias.
Precisely. The key insight from their work is that even journalists who are genuinely trying to be objective, they still operate within a broader framework, a sort of professional culture that unconsciously favors dominant ideas.
Which leads to things like agenda setting.
Exactly. Deciding what topics even get covered, what makes it onto the news radar in the first place, and also gatekeeping, deciding how those stories are told, what details get included or left out, which voices get heard.
That's a fascinating and, yeah, a bit unsettling thought.
Yeah.
That bias can be built right into the system, almost invisibly. And building on that, our sources also introduce a really powerful model from Herman and Chomsky. It explains the mechanics, the nuts and bolts of how biased content can become the norm. What are some of the key filters they identified?
Right. The propaganda model, it identifies 5 filters. One really significant one is just the size, ownership, and profit orientation of media corporations. Meaning these are huge businesses driven by profit. That commercial imperative fundamentally shapes their decisions about what's safe to cover, what's profitable to cover, and how.
Okay, that makes sense. What's another one?
Advertising. This is huge. Media outlets rely so heavily on advertising revenue.
So they can't afford to bite the hand that feeds them.
Pretty much. Content tends to avoid seriously offending major advertisers, and it often aims to create a buying mood or attract the specific demographics those advertisers want to reach.
And you mentioned 5 filters. A third one, which I think is incredibly relevant today, is sourcing.
Yes, absolutely. Media outlets often rely heavily, sometimes almost exclusively, on official sources.
Government spokespeople, corporate press releases, think tanks, established experts.
Exactly. And relying on these sources inherently shapes the narrative. It gives certain voices and perspectives disproportionate weight, almost making them the default truth while marginalizing other viewpoints.
It's efficient for newsrooms, but it builds in a bias.
It certainly can. And then there's flack.
Flack, like criticism.
Essentially, yeah. Negative responses, pressure, complaints, lawsuits, lobbying from powerful groups or individuals that can deter critical reporting.
So if a story generates too much trouble from someone important,
it makes a newsroom think twice before pursuing similar investigations or critical lines of inquiry in the future. It chills reporting.
And the 5th filter.
Originally, it was anti-communism, but it's been updated to include things like the war on terror or a prevailing national ideology. Basically, having a dominant ideology or a perceived common enemy helps mobilize support for state actions and demonize dissent or critical perspectives that fall outside that framework.
Wow. The overall insight from Herman and Chomsky, then, is how these subtle yet powerful forces just filter the news.
Yeah, they argue these filters work together almost invisibly to shape the news you receive, making true journalistic neutrality, or even just covering certain stories properly, an incredibly difficult, perhaps almost impossible task within that system.
It really makes you think differently about where your news comes from, doesn't it?
It does.
When you start seeing those underlying forces, it naturally leads us to the next crucial question. Okay, so who actually holds the reins in the media world today? And our sources point very clearly to a significant ongoing trend, the concentration of ownership.
This is a really important development, yes. Over the last few decades, there's been a very clear move towards fewer, much larger media corporations owning more and more media outlets. Think newspapers, TV stations, radio, film studios, websites.
Fewer owners, more control.
That's the concern. And this naturally raises the question, how does this concentration actually, manifest itself? We see 2 main ways this happens.
Right. First, there's what they call horizontal integration. Can you break that down?
Sure. Horizontal integration is when a media company buys up different types of media across various platforms. So one company might own newspapers, TV channels, radio stations, maybe book publishers, websites.
Spreading their influence wide, like Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, owning papers, TV, etc.
That's a classic example, yes. They broaden their reach across different formats to capture a larger share of the overall media market.
Okay. And the other type?
That's vertical integration. This is different. It occurs when a media company controls multiple stages of its own production and distribution chain.
Ah, so controlling the whole process.
Exactly. Think of a major film studio like, say, Disney. It produces films, but it also owns the distribution company, maybe the streaming service like Disney Plus Wires, and historically, companies even own the cinemas where the films were shown.
Owning the factory, the delivery truck, and the store.
That's a good analogy. It's about controlling the entire pipeline from creation right through to consumption.
And the key takeaway here from our sources is that this kind of concentration, whether it's horizontal or vertical, well, it often reduces genuine choice and diversity for you, the audience.
That's the major concern, yes. It can potentially lead to a much narrower range of viewpoints being presented.
Because a few powerful owners can push their own specific agendas. consciously or maybe even unconsciously.
Right? Their interests, their worldview can permeate the content produced across their vast holdings.
Okay, so building on that, let's zoom in even closer on the actual mechanics. How exactly is media content shaped? Not just theoretically, but day to day, behind the scenes. It's not always a direct order from the top, is it?
No, often it's more subtle than that. Although direct owner control certainly happens, owners can, and sometimes do, intervene directly. They might dictate editorial lines, especially on issues that directly affect their business interests or their political
And
viewpoints.
they hire the top editors, right? People who likely share their outlook.
Exactly. They often appoint editors and senior staff who align with their views, which creates a sort of natural built-in alignment without needing constant directives.
Okay, so owner influence is one way. What else?
Well, we touched on it with the propaganda model, but advertiser control is a huge factor in the day-to-day. Media outlets, especially commercial ones, are heavily reliant on that advertising revenue.
So content might be shaped, maybe subtly, to avoid offending those big advertisers.
Yes, or shaped to appeal more directly to the specific demographics those advertisers want to reach. It's a powerful, often quiet influence on editorial choices.
Then there's the state. How does state control fit in?
Governments can exert influence in various ways. Obviously, there's direct censorship in some countries.
Yeah.
But even in democracies, there are regulatory bodies like Ofcom in the UK, the FCC in the US that set broadcasting standards and can grant or revoke licenses.
And sometimes the state owns media outlets directly, like the BBC.
Right, although state or public broadcasters like the BBC often operate with a specific public service remit, which is supposed to ensure impartiality and serve the public interest, not just the government's. How well that works in practice is often debated, of course.
Of course. But what I find truly fascinating, and maybe the most insidious because it's often invisible, is the role of journalist self-censorship. How does that work?
It's a really powerful mechanism. Journalists, often quite unconsciously, may self-censor.
Meaning they hold back without being told to.
Exactly. This can happen for various reasons. Maybe to fit in with the perceived editorial line of their employer, to avoid conflict with editors or owners, or sometimes to avoid anticipated flack from powerful groups outside the newsroom.
So they anticipate the negative reaction and adjust accordingly.
And this often gets linked to what are called news values.
Ah, the unwritten rules of what makes something news.
Yes, things like impact, timeliness, proximity, conflict, novelty, prominence. Journalists internalize these values. They learn what kind of stories work, what gets published, what gets praised. And these values often implicitly align with dominant societal perspectives or the interests of their organization.
So the journalist might select or frame a story based on these learned values without even realizing they're filtering out other possibilities.
Precisely. It's a subtle, yet incredibly pervasive form of control where the filter isn't external, it's internalized by the professionals themselves.
That's a truly unsettling thought. It implies bias can just seep into the system without anyone having malicious intent necessarily.
It can be systemic.
So that brings us, naturally, to a really important question for today's world. What about new media? You know, the internet, social media, streaming services. Has all this digital stuff changed the game when it comes to ownership and control?
The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Well, it's a mixed bag, really. It depends heavily on which perspective you lean towards.
Okay, give us the optimistic view first, the pluralist take.
Right, from an optimistic, more pluralist viewpoint, new media has absolutely democratized content creation, hasn't it?
In theory, yeah. Anyone with a smartphone.
Exactly. Anyone can publish, share information globally, connect with like-minded people. This is seen as leading to far greater diversity of voices and opinions. It challenges the traditional media gatekeepers.
And empowers the audience. Things like citizen journalism, independent blogs.
Bypassing mainstream channels entirely, offering alternative perspectives. It looks like a much more open, participatory landscape.
It certainly feels like a massive shift sometimes. But then, if we put on that critical lens again, what's the pessimistic view?
Well, the critical perspectives argue that new media still suffers from a similar, perhaps even more intense, concentration of ownership.
How so?
Think about it. A handful of incredibly powerful tech giants, Google, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, they dominate the digital landscape.
They own the platforms, the infrastructure.
It's control the platforms, yes.
Yeah.
But also the algorithms that decide what you see, what gets amplified, what gets buried. And they control vast amounts of user data, which shapes your online experience and is incredibly valuable.
So the gatekeepers have just changed form. From media barons to tech giants.
That's the argument. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this kind of digital concentration can lead to new forms of inequality. The digital divide, where access to information, technology, and skills isn't equal.
And it fuels things like filter bubbles or echo chambers.
Exactly. Those algorithms, designed to keep you engaged, often end up curating your feed so you primarily see content that confirms your existing views.
Limiting exposure to different perspectives, making consensus harder.
Potentially polarizing society further. It's a significant concern.
So it's a real double-edged sword then, because even with all these new platforms popping up, traditional media outlets, the big established players, they still hold significant influence, don't they? They often just use new media, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, to disseminate their content and amplify their reach.
That's absolutely true. The underlying power structures, the ownership concentration we talked about earlier, might remain largely unchanged in many ways. They've just adapted to the new digital environment, often very effectively.
So maybe it's not quite the revolution some hoped for.
Or at least it's a much more complex picture than just democratization.
Okay. So as you can clearly see from everything we've discussed, the ownership and control of the media, it's a really complex and, frankly, highly contested area.
Definitely not simple.
Our deep dive today has shown you the two main sides of the debate. You've got the pluralists who see a diverse media landscape driven largely by your choices and market demand.
The optimistic view.
Right, and then you have the Marxist and Neo-Marxist perspectives who argue quite strongly that media ownership is highly concentrated and primarily serves the interests of the powerful, shaping ideology and limiting genuine choice for you.
The critical view, focusing on power and ideology. And the rise of new media, as we just discussed, adds another fascinating, complicated layer to this ongoing debate. It presents both these exciting opportunities for greater diversity and participation.
But also new, often quite subtle, challenges regarding concentrated digital power, algorithms, and data control.
Exactly. It hasn't necessarily resolved the core issues.
So, as you navigate the vast sea of information, the news articles, the videos, the social posts that come your way every single day, maybe just remember to consider who owns the platform you're on.
Who might benefit from the message you're seeing or hearing?
And perhaps most importantly, think about what voices, what perspectives might be missing from the conversation entirely.
That's a crucial question.
What stories are being amplified for you and why? That's your challenge, perhaps, for deeper exploration.